Winter is my favorite season to play some horror games. Short days and long nights means that I can play games in the dark at 5 PM. Meanwhile, the lack of natural light and the end of the year drawing closer and closer means I'm often in a bad mood and need to distract myself. Put those together and what do you get? You get a good reason to play a lot of tiny indie games. And when I say tiny, I mean tiny. The 3 games of today have less than 50 Steam reviews in total. Let's go through them one by one, starting with the lesser known of the bunch, but possibly the most ambitious, Planet Scanner. It's the future and nothing much has changed. Spam emails abound, Alex Jones gets sued, boss makes $1 and I make a dime. That's why I check Twitter on company time. Twitter is still bad. Planet Scanner is a game about having a bad day job and then even worse stuff happens. It's in the same realm of Paper Please, Don't Feed the Monkeys and Orwell. This time your terrible job consists of being stationed on an off-world telescope, scoping out planets for your company to call dibs on and resell, hopefully at a profit. Planets vary in size, temperature, rotation speed, surface solidity, and so on. Although you start with just a handful of parameters, making your job very easy and very boring, things do get more complicated eventually. When that change happens is not predetermined, it depends on how you play the game, and at least in my case, it was far too late. When I read the pitch for Planet Scanner, I got really excited. A parody of gig work and a repetitive job simulator with slow burn horror on top, that's the game for me. Am I boring? Anyway, I wasn't ready for just how slow of a burn this was. And it's not just a horror, the whole thing takes forever to get started. I expected Planet Scanner to be challenging or even unfair, like trying to survive with a gig economy job. Instead, it's just boring. You're given way too much time to find the planets worth the most money that day. Many of your main actions, like scanning planets and uploading the scans to the servers, take time to complete. Way too much time. In another game, this could have added to the weight of your decisions, a cost to pay in time added to every action taken during the day. Here, it just adds to the boringness. The massive time limit makes waiting around a non-issue for the game character, but it doesn't eliminate the toll it takes on the player. Do you want to wait 30 seconds to make marginally more income on this game day? You do? Cool. It will also make your timer go from 8 minutes to 7 minutes and 30 seconds. It doesn't really matter, but I thought that if I said that, you'd feel like you're making a strategic choice, instead of exchanging your time for fictional money. So obviously I didn't like Planet Scanner, but I'm sure that if enough people knew about it, it would find some fans. I can see some people earnestly enjoying going through the motion of opening a new star system, watching the planet's silhouettes to decide which one to scan, and comparing their stats to today's market prices. It would have to be a very specific kind of player, willing to dedicate themselves to a fictional job while listening to a podcast or something like that, while also being fine with horror elements eventually creeping in. Sadly, that's not me. Now, the envelope, that's a different story. It's not quite as well written as Planet Scanner. Actually, no, the writing is just bad, at least in the English translation. But otherwise, Envelope is exactly what I expect when I think of short indie horror games. If it wasn't so weird and occasionally kinda trashy, or perhaps if it was more of that, it could almost pass for an alt game, like Pagan or Agony of a Dying MMO. Instead, Envelope is a highly replayable open-world adventure game about finding the means to kill a cult leader and then committing murder. Now, I know that doesn't sound great, but rest assured, you do get to commit other crimes as well, including extorting money out of a drug-addicted kid on account of the mafia, stealing from pretty much everyone except the supermarket, and other murders. The game is divided into 3 chapters. The first is just a prologue, explaining how you got roped into this mission to assassinate a guy. Unlike the other chapters, this one is not meant to be replayed. Chapter 2 is where you'll spend most of your time, collecting items like a gun, some bullets, energy drinks, other weapons and tools, and the money to buy those weapons and tools. You'll spend most of your time with this game within the suburbs and forests of Chapter 2. Once you think you're done here, you can move on to the last chapter, the mansion. If you're well equipped and you've been here before, you can probably manage to kill your target just fine. Otherwise, consider this a practice run. Once you're done with the basic ending, you might want to find the rest. If you decide to do so, you'll unlock the final epilogue. I like Envelope. There are lots of details to keep in mind in Chapter 2, like item positions and tricks to get stuff for cheap, that make repeated playthroughs feel like they're worth the effort. It does take a bit too long to move around, but that's just personal preference. What doesn't really work is the writing, and not just the wonky translation. This game has some weird and whimsical moments I really like, and the spooky scenery occasionally works really well, but take a couple steps and a guy at a bus station will tell you that the cult leader is a serial rapist and he kills children for fun, and that kinda takes the magic out of the sentient duck that collects antique coins. It's not like you can't do silly and serious at the same time. Twin Peaks famously does both to great effect, but that's because it's a well-written show, and Envelope is really, really not. I feel like I'm being mean to some very small games from people who are basically doing this for free. I don't think I'm actually being mean, but let's move to a game that I have nothing but praise for, so I can feel better about myself. Iron Shift markets itself as an action game of high-intensity combat that will put your reaction speed to the test. I don't think that's true. The game does occasionally require some twitchy movement that can feel very intense, but overall, it plays much more like a puzzle game. It's as much of a combat game as Stealth Inc. is a stealth title, or as Tactical Bridge Wizard is a tactics game. There is some action to be had, especially in the later levels, but your success, generally speaking, rests much more on planning than execution. The setup in Iron Shift is simple, and it is literally just a setup. There is no story. That said, making the player character a hostile creature taking over a spaceship run by vaguely incompetent and somewhat evil humans is genius. You're instantly immersed in the underdog warrior fantasy of being extremely fragile, but at the same time able to win a war by yourself. It shares the same core appeal of the stealth/action/strategy titles of Mimimi, like Shadow Tactics and Shadow Gambit. Except where Mimimi uses complex stories with multifaceted voice characters and some pretty good writing to sell that specific power fantasy, Iron Shift accomplishes the same thing with just a setting. Iron Shift is great, and it is criminal how it has been ignored by the press and the players. Though to be fair, if no one tells them it exists, how are they supposed to play it? From this point on, I'm just going to try to sell this game to you. If you're already interested, you might want to skip this and go ahead to the part where you buy it and then play it. Some parts of Iron Shift remind me of quick saving at the wrong time in the original Doom. HP at 1% with 3 fireballs already running towards me, dying and reloading time after time, eventually memorizing a combination of keystrokes and poses that gets me out of this loop. This is how Iron Shift feels when it's been kind of annoying. Even when it's a bit too punishing and requires way too precise input, it's still fun. It certainly helps that the sections are very short and that the checkpoints are very generous. While I'm not sure what the difficulty selection actually does, there is an easy mode if you'd rather not have the odds stacked against you all the time. Though again, this is an underdog story, it's only fitting that it be kind of unfair sometimes. What else? Oh yeah, buy Iron Shift, it's really good. Bye!